So the title of the talk is Experience in AAC in Bulgaria. But of course, you figured out that this is the experience of our foundation, how we saw, sorry, could you mute your microphone, please? And so it's related a little bit to the history of assistive technologies, our foundation. So we are all co-authors with Evgeniya Hristova. We are co-founders of assistive technology. And we would like to present a little bit how our activities developed in view of the situation with AAC in Bulgaria, as we actually found it 7 years ago, and as it is now. So I'll start with some memories from the beginning. So this young man is Dieter. He is using an eye gaze system with the communicator 5. And his mother was one of the reasons we actually paid attention to this field, the field of AAC. Before we were dealing with eye tracking for cognitive scientific or cognitive psychological research in a lab and for other type of studies, but not using eye gaze as an access method, as it's called, a method to work on a computer. And so the mother of Dieter actually asked, you are the only one who have anything to do with eye tracking, so probably you can help me. And we said, no, we don't know about assistive technology or AAC. She said, but you must know them, you must learn. And so this was really a moment when we decided to look into it. And actually took us about 3 years before we were able actually to organize a provision of AAC related to eye tracking in Bulgaria because of the many restrictions that we had at the time. So Sasho from Varna is the first user in Bulgaria. He is from Varna, and actually he started, he had his own system with eye tracking back into 2009, to my knowledge. But actually at the time, nobody could help him use this system. And according to his father, actually he with friends tried to figure out how the software worked and actually tried to build some application themselves. But my impression is that they were not so well developed. Although now Sasho has the latest system, plays games and studies very successfully in a school. So this is Annie. Everybody knows Annie, but it was some time ago. She's young here with her initial system, and she was quite fortunate at her 6th birthday to have a present from a foundation, St. George. It's a UK Bulgarian foundation, which actually donated a system for her, and she started very quickly to work with it. So this is Annie now, 4 years later, with a very sophisticated system, writing and communicating with other and programming in Scratch, which we showed during the, maybe not the last, but before the last conference. So she can use her gaze in order to access all the capabilities of a computer, and she does everything that can be done. This is Angela, and I know that most of the Bulgarian attendees know her. She is an ambassador of AAC for our foundation for many years. She was the first person who we met and with whom we talked, and we asked her to try to use an eye gaze system, and actually she started doing so very quickly. But before that, she has started her autobiographical book, and actually she could write very well, but she did this very painfully with just the one movement she had preserved. This is the movement of her left thumb. And so with eye tracking, everything is much, much better. And you can see her table of her wheelchair with the alphabet there. So in the beginning, when we started our activity, we saw our task as a simple one. So we thought that, okay, eye gaze access method to a computer is not known. We can teach professionals how to use it. We can provide, we can support. and then they can use it in all the tasks that they usually do. But unfortunately, this was not the case. This was not the situation. And all the other software, for instance, a software for graphic symbolic communication was not known to most of the professionals. And little by little, it turned out that the AAC in general is not well known. So many people confounded communication with learning. There was some kind of boards with pictures, and people use them in learning tasks, but didn't know how to use them in order to build vocabularies for children or give them means to communicate. And so we changed the scope of our activity dramatically. So from providers of very specialized high-tech AAC, we actually started doing rising awareness for the country with several big events in the major cities in Bulgaria, traveling across the country, meeting professionals, meeting families, and trying to basically change the situation with it. So the final result, which is great, is a network of stakeholders in AAC we are part of, and we are very happy and grateful to all our partners across the countries and everywhere in the ministries. And I'll tell more about our partnerships with some institutions. And actually, one of our main occupation right now is provide training for AAC professionals. So along the way, we started looking why the Bulgarian legislation is not so close, for instance, to the Convention on the Rights of People with Disabilities, started reading these documents, started looking where we can find some kind of basis of ground in order to have these devices into school, into families. And actually, we couldn't find such a ground. So we actually went to the basics, to the Convention on the Rights of Persons with Disabilities. And of course, there are several articles there that mention explicitly alternative and augmentative communication, the need to basically grant it for the users who need it in order to develop. And what I found actually recently is that the convention actually was put forward in 2006, but 10 years later, there is this general comment number 4, which says that the states parties are failing to make appropriate provision for persons with disabilities, particularly persons on the autism spectrum, those with communication impairments and with sensory disabilities. So you see that an important part of what is missing is related to AAC. So similar to Article 26. So once again, many of the people who actually participated in our training probably remember the Communication Bill of Rights, which we liked very much as something that changed the perspective of society, of professionals, even of family, about what a person needing AAC should be able to do. And so the idea is that communication is the right for everybody, and the access to functioning augmentative and alternative communication is also such a right for people who need it at all times. And so you can see, you can read the different tasks that you can do with this. So for instance, to be offered choices, this is something clear for most people, but also to express feelings, to request information, to know the meaning of life, to know something about yourself, and so on and so forth. So actually, years ago, our scope of activities started to be quite a large list. And apart from provision and support, raising awareness, consultations and evaluations, development of educational products using AAC became a central part, training and certification also. And lately, so 3 years ago, we proposed a course in AAC for SLP programs in the New Bulgaria University. But actually, these courses couldn't start for one or another reason. But we have next month a course with the ergotherapy program, ergotherapy in inclusive education program. And we are very happy that this course will be taught for the first time. And of course, we try to establish working contacts with policymakers, decision makers, because we know that legislation can be improved much more. And of course, the funding of AAC technologies for families must be ensured. It is a right. It is not something that is mandatory. So I remind you about the conditions that require AAC just for a moment. And once again, the statistics, which is really very important. So it is amazing how many people need, in general, assistive technology. Some of them need AAC. And you see that in Bulgaria, the number of people, it's an estimation. It's not, there has not been any systematic assessment, is about 100,000 people, but it's a number like that. It can be larger, it can be smaller as well. But also we try to have an estimation of children that require high-tech AAC related to higher technology, mainly due to motor impairments, which do not allow them to point, for instance, or to grasp objects or to do something. And the only option is to use some alternative access method. Recently, and this is not a recent initiative, actually, I think that it dates back to 2014 of the World Health Organization. The idea had been that because of the important part of assistive technologies, somehow some prescriptions about the governments have to be made, but they have to be more specific. So the idea was to have a priority assistive products list that each country should provide, hopefully for free, to everybody who needs it. And in this list, I think that it's supplemented with some specifications. So what are the good products to look for? What are the approximate prices? So that the service that is provided is kind of high quality service. And so I use this list just to briefly and very quickly introduce the main AAC, the main types of AAC technologies. And so you see you can look for this GATE initiative and find the list. It's published already, but part of it covers the so-called low-tech AAC. It's a AAC not needing electrical supply, and the most frequently used such tool are communication boards, usually laminated to be more robust, or other type of boards. And the other part are the high-tech AAC, which all these let's say boards with symbols, with graphic symbols, are from softwares. So software is part of high-tech AAC. And even if you use low-tech AAC, you need some software in order to print or in order to use on a computer. So even low-tech AAC is also high-tech in some respect, because you need something to actually create such materials. One important aspect of high-tech is the synthesized speech, the text-to-speech, which allows to replace the speech of people, of children, adults who cannot talk. And this is extremely important, especially if these text-to-speech softwares are quite sophisticated to allow for individualization, so that you have your own unique voice as you would like it. So there are other devices which are portable. We just discussed, Professor von Techner discussed the inclusion in school. One of the aspects of this inclusion is to have a device that is attractive to other children. So if your device is clumsy, is heavy, doesn't look well, it can be a problem. The children can have a negative attitude. But if it is, as some people say, sexy and nice and attractive, it will actually lead to a kind of communication from the very beginning, when children will be interested in using this device, in adding something in order for the child using the device to express something they talk about. And this is also a sign of inclusion in this case. So text is obviously when children can write, they can use text. One important aspect, which is not directly related to AAC, it is an assistive technology, but this is the alternative computer access, or access to a computer. So children or adults with physical impairments, they can have difficulties in using a normal keyboard or a mouse or a touchscreen. And there are devices that are called access devices that allow for the use of a computer. And then you can use all the software, including the specialized AAC software. So some of the quite widely used access methods are the switches and also the eye gaze technology. So here the eye gaze access to a computer is shown again with Ani. So you see a kind of a specialized integrated device. The eye gaze is inside and Ani can write anything with her eyes. And you see that there is a second screen which is positioned there so that the conversational partner can be in front of the child and not behind the child, which is not so natural in communication, and can see what she writes in this case. So Angela Pencheva is also a kind of famous user of AAC, and within the context of what we are discussing, inclusive education, it's very appropriate to discuss how she deals with AAC, because she finished high school last year. And actually, the school for her was postponed with many years. And if she had such assistive technologies at the time, she could have graduated long ago. And we can just imagine what she could have written, because she wrote her autobiographical book. This is just an example of an old assistive technology. This is a weight used to press the shift or control key, and then to press another key, which she used in writing her book, because she has a movement which is preserved of her left thumb. And we'll see, I think, tomorrow a movie about her, and she will be there, so you can ask her questions about how she felt at the time. So all this asks the question why these technologies hadn't developed faster if they are so useful. And many people ask this question. We participated in a study, so we actually did the study commissioned by the European Association of Service Providers for Persons with Disabilities about the barriers not only of high-tech AT and AAC, but of any ICT in general in the social service providers for persons with disabilities. And these are the generalized average results, which this is a kind of ordering by importance. So the larger the bar, the more important the barrier. And if the first barrier, the financial barrier, is not surprising, it's an averaging over rich and poor countries. So for countries like Norway or Sweden, the financial barrier is very small. But for countries to the south, like Bulgaria, for instance, it is very important, especially for the families, not so much for the inclusive education centers. But you see, and we were relatively surprised to see that the second after the financial barrier is the training barrier, that there is no training in AAC, the qualification barrier, and also the lack of qualified professionals barrier. So these two are related. If there is no training, there won't be qualified professionals in this field. And then you have the resource barrier, you have the knowledge and skill of the families, environmental barrier, and so on and so forth. But you see that one of the most important is the training, the qualification barriers. And so in our activity, you try to account for these barriers specifically, of course, for the others as well, but less actively. And we worked with all target group, all groups of stakeholders in various ways, awareness, AAC provision and funding, education and training, and also try to participate this modestly in some policies formation and legislation. But in all this way, I must state that actually we were quite pleasantly surprised in finding very good partners. The Ministry of Education and Science from the very beginning in 2015, actually the first month of existence of our foundation, actually started a project or continued the project Inclusive Education, in which about 20 to 24 educational centers, schools, resource centers, kindergartens within inclusive education could actually get a system with an eye gaze system and were trained at that time. Then we also had several projects within the Ministry of Labor and Social Policy system. For instance, the Social Protection Fund actually funds families partially, but with a substantial 50, 60%. When there is an opinion by experts, what type of equipment is needed. So it's a unique opportunity for families. But I think that the funding within the fund is limited by the amount of money that this fund has. But nevertheless, this is a great opportunity for many families we know. Then the Agency for People with Disabilities, some years ago, a project with them allowed us to look to find out where are children with severe physical impairments who needed AAC, and try to find them, work with them in order to see what progress they can make, and then more or less prescribe, in a sense, or advise parents or different centers to purchase such equipment. And of course, we are participating in the National Council for Child Protection, where some policies are discussed. More recently, we started partnerships with UNICEF, first with UNICEF Bulgaria, and we are very warmly supported in this partnership with the conferences that we organize locally, the international conferences on AAC, but also on some of these very important topics like education, training of professionals from the resource centers. So funded by UNICEF, we could train professionals from 6 resource centers for 3 consecutive training of 2 days. I suppose and I hope that some of you have actually participated in this training. And then, of course, we have connections with some NGOs, some organizations that are related to this topic. So concerning inclusive education, related to the Ministry of Education and Science, I quoted these large projects. Even recently and even now, there is this project of support of inclusive education, and we have been contacted by many professionals working in schools in the system of inclusive education, asking for IAC systems, for consultations, and for training. So this is an important funding, and my impression is that the problem is not that the money is limited in this funding, but that it is the interest of professionals, the knowledge about what they will get, how to work with it, and which children will benefit from it. And in Bulgaria, as you know, there are 42 data from the website of the Ministry of Education, special education support centers, and 28 regional centers for the inclusive education process support. In many of them, we have done trainings, and many of them have such systems, and I hope that they use them intensively. At the same time, some of these trainings are accredited by the ministry, so they can serve for some kind of promotion or some kind of portfolio of teachers. So within the projects that we actually finished this year, the project development of communication and learning skills for children with severe motor impairments using eye control. In this project, children and young people from the family type residential centers in Bulgaria were targeted, assuming that when a child cannot be transported to a regular school or to a center, less attention is paid to learning, to developing communication skills, and actually special equipment is needed, namely eye gaze access to computer. And you can see on the photograph the settings in which these 1,707 training sessions have been performed in a COVID-19 conditions. So congratulations and thanks to the professionals who actually did them, and to the directors who actually let these professionals do their work. And at the same time, some families tested and validated the training materials that we developed. And finally, everything that was developed in this process is a whole educational system, actually is put into the form of a guide, of a book that can be used both for getting acquainted with high-tech and training with high-tech and communication with high-tech, but also if you have access to the materials that are more than 700, you can, and you have the right system that can use these materials, professionals can use it in their work immediately. So after short training, they have a program that can last about 700 hours, which is a large amount of time for basic skill, language and conceptual development, quantity, concepts and mathematical skills, basic literacy for reading and writing, and communication competencies. So if somebody is interested, we'll be happy to give more information. In the partnership with UNICEF Bulgaria, we actually had this project facilitating inclusion of children with disabilities and developmental difficulties through augmentative and alternative communication and AT. And within this, we performed a study of attitudes, acquaintance, and frequency of use of AAC and computer access among professionals from the regional centers. And informed by the results, which were not very positive, unfortunately, we did the trainings that some of you know in 6 regional centers, and I think that they were quite beneficial. But of course, attendees must share their opinion. And then within this project, again, it's something to be used by professionals who want or who are using AAC, AT. It's a kind of catalog which has more than 70 products, modern products, but it is also complemented with a large part which describes how to use them, what are the types, what are the conditions they are used for, what are the actually the good and bad sides of them. And so this information, it should be a kind of tool that professionals can use. So within this, as I mentioned already, within this partnership, we could organize these 3 conferences, also with the substantial help of the Bulgarian Ministry of Education and Science. This conference that you are attending for free, we are very happy to be able to offer this option. And pre-conference seminar that took place this morning, and I hope that there will be attendance from the countries concerned by this initiative of UNICEF regional office. So our direct partner is Nora Shabani, and we are very thankful of her actually participation, attention, and help with everything. So this partnership is called Knowledge Exchange and Learning on AAC in Europe and Central Asia. And we are very happy to contribute and to help. So let me share some of these results, which I said I tried to prepare, are not so positive, but nevertheless, I think that we need a basis from which to start and improve. And therefore, what we see here, although this remained in Bulgarian, but these are the percentage of answers. So it's a questionnaire with more than 200 professionals from the regional centers from Bulgaria, which responded to, it's a self-assessment questionnaire. So they judge themselves what to answer. There are no some other tool how to assess this. So people assess themselves. So you can see this is acquaintance with AAC, and it is acquaintance with low-tech AAC, intermediate tech AAC, high-tech, and access to computer. And so the red bar means bad, so it is unknown to professionalists. So for low-tech, it's just 8%, and 30% know a little bit, so it's about 21%. And 34 know something to some extent. But with intermediate, you see that about more than 50% don't know at the level required for a professional intermediate tech AAC. For high tech, this percentage reaches something like 80%, and for access to computer, it is even more. Once again, these are self-assessment of participants. And about frequency of use, which is of course related to acquaintance, you can see that it is even more dramatic. Once again, red means bad. So red means I never use low tech, I never use intermediate tech, I never use high tech or any assistive technology for access to computer. So you see that almost nobody uses access to computer, almost nobody uses high tech. And this is not just to say, okay, nobody knows anything. The idea is that we have a lot of work to do. And I'm very happy that UNICEF Bulgaria started this initiative with CBORD, with training of professionals in AAC. So I hope that in the years to come, this will improve. So what remains to be done? I'm sorry that you don't see me, but I don't want to interrupt myself, just to finish. So what remains to be done? One of the most important things to do is to talk about AAC in the legislation documents, so that it has its role, it is central, it is there, all professionals know what it is, how to implement it, and it is implemented from early intervention on in inclusive education. It lacks so far in our legislation. Then the similar problem, not a lesser problem, is funding for families, because each child needs AAC from the very beginning and needs needs professionals who know how to use it, and so on and so forth. Early interventions are part of it, and the most important question from the professional side are the qualification in AAC for professionals, and this should start from the university programs with very extensive, practically oriented courses in AAC in AT. And I think that this is all. So I want just to draw your attention to the fact that inclusive education is for children. Children grow and time matters. So we have to be in a hurry. You see Annie, probably 3 years old here with no AAC device around. So she got her device when she was 6. And Angela, who before having her device 7 years ago, actually had this table with the alphabet. So thank you very much for your attention. And if you have any questions, I'll be more than happy to answer. Sorry for being in the dark.